Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about basic data types and variables. And even though we'll be learning how to use these data types in Snap, these ideas and concepts are common to every programming language that you can find. This is Snap Class 1.2, Basic Data Types and Variables. So let's think about something. Say you're using a computer and you want to copy an emoji from a website so you can use it. You then just have to copy the emoji and then paste it somewhere else. Specifically, what is happening there is that the computer is remembering the data or information for that emoji and then storing that temporary data in something called random access memory, or RAM for short. There's many different types of data that computers have learned to understand, but there are three main important ones. These are integers, floating point numbers, and strings. Integers are really the same thing as integers in math. They're numbers without a decimal. They're also known as whole numbers, and they can also be positive or negative or zero, unlike whole numbers. Basically, as long as there is no decimal point or decimal digits, the number is an integer. Anything with decimals is a floating point number, like negative 5.0, negative 20.3, etc. Those two cover both normal numbers and numbers with decimals. Strings are another data type. A string can store any sort of text inside of it. Usually you can put quotes around it in programming languages to show it's a string. You can store emojis inside strings as well. Integers, floating point numbers, and strings are all known as data types. So let's have an activity. Pause the video so you can answer these questions. When you're done, resume the video so we can go over the answers. Okay, assuming you've paused the video and taken a look at these problems, let's answer them. Number 1, 11 is an integer because it doesn't have any decimals and it has no quotes around it. 124, in this case, is a string because it has quotes around it. The third one is a decimal because it has a decimal point. The fourth one is going to be a string because text is always contained inside a string. Your full address is once again a string. Your birth year is an integer because your year of birth does not have a decimal point and it can be stored as a number. Therefore, it can be an integer. Booleans. The Boolean is the final data type we'll be discussing today. A Boolean is always one of two values, true or false. Answer this question. Is this Boolean true or false, and why? Pause the video, and when you are done, resume so we can go over the answer. Assuming you had a go at it, the answer is true because 4 is less than 5, as the Boolean shows. In Snap, the shape of the block decides what it is supposed to do. Blocks that return Booleans look like a really long hexagon. The name for this type of block is known as a predicate. It is supposed to evaluate to a Boolean value, true or false. If you look at the examples, there is an equal block. If you put 3 or 5 inside that predicate, it will report false because 3 is not equal to 5. Similarly, the is blank a number block requires an input and it will report true or false based on whether the number is an input or not. The other two examples demonstrate the same concept. If the object is touching another object, the first blue predicate will report true. If you are clicking using your mouse, the mouse down button will be true. If you aren't, the Boolean reported will be false. The cool thing about Snap is that it can automatically identify a data type, string, integer, floating point number. For example, this block has the word two data types, hello and two different types of data. For the first one, integers and floating point numbers cannot have letters in them, so Snap automatically knows that hello is a string. For the second one, even though 2 can be a string data type, Snap knows that the 2 refers to the number of seconds, and therefore it expects some type of number, either an integer or a floating point number. When it sees that the number entered does not have a decimal, it knows it is an integer. Note that even if you enter 2 instead of hello for the first box, Snap would identify it as a string because it is a text that you were trying to say. In Snap, all the blocks with numbers already inside them, such as the move block, support both integers and floating point numbers, as they are both types of numbers. Basically, Snap does not differentiate between decimals and integers. They are all considered the same. There are other types of blocks in Snap. After predicates, the next one is called a command block. Command blocks basically just run things. You can think of each of them as an action. The block move 10 steps is an action block, and so is the say hello for 2 seconds block. It is important to know that the command blocks do not return anything. They also look like puzzle pieces and can be put together. Operators. In Snap, oval blocks are known as reporters. They give back an integer, floating point number, or a string, depending on the block. To see what a reporter is reporting, you can just click the block in Snap. There are 4 basic blocks in the operator category that are used for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing floating point numbers and integers. These all return an integer or floating point number when they are used. There are some more advanced math reporters, such as the exponent block and the modulo block. The exponent block is the first number. Basically, what happens is that the first number that goes into the block x is a number that is going to be multiplied by itself a certain number of times. The second block, y, is the number of times that the first number will be multiplied by itself. The name for this would be x raised to the y power. Example, 3 raised to the second power means 3 times 3, which returns 9. The modulo block. This reports the remainder when the first number x is divided by the second number y. This is represented as x mod y. For example, 5 mod 3 means the remainder when 5 is divided by 3 is 2, so it returns 2. Reporters with strings. Reporters can actually also report strings. A block such as join hello world can put 2 strings together. Note that this will not automatically add a space. Instead, this needs to be manually added by putting a space in front of the hello or before the world. Some reporters might not be decided by the programmer but by the user. An example of this is the ask and wait block, which is used by the programmer to ask the user for an input. The input will be stored inside the answer block, and you can use the ask and wait block again. It is useful to set answer to a variable so Snap remembers it. This is because when you use the ask and wait block again, it will overwrite answer, and the answer block will actually change to values. We will talk about variables, which is useful for storing answers and other values in a future slide. Note that when the green flag clicked block will run, the script will complete when the green flag is clicked. This script is asking the user for their first name. It will then return the answer block. It will then ask the user for their last name. Hence, the programmer will use the answer block again. Even though it is the same block, the new value of answer overwrites the old value. Overwriting a value means that you're changing what it used to hold. The answer used to hold my first name, but now it holds my last name. You might ask, how do we have multiple answers stored inside Snap? The answer to this is a variable. Variables can be used to hold data, whether it be a string, floating point number, or an integer. Snap will keep track of and remember variables and their values until they are overwritten. In that case, when you print a variable's value, it will be the newest value. This animation is creating a variable. First, click the Make a Variable button, type in a name for the variable, such as my variable, click OK, and a variable will be created. You can use that variable later on. Note that variables also default to 0. This script is asking the user for their first name. It then says the name through the answer block. Now, The script sets the value of a variable called myVariable to answer. This will store the user's first name in that variable. From there, the script asks the user for their last name, printing out the answer block, now overwritten, and then it prints out myVariable, which contains the first name, not the last name. The reason for this is because you set myVariable to answer before you ask for the last name. Therefore, myVariable has the old value of answer before answer got overwritten. Therefore, the script will first say the first name, then say the last name, then say the first name again, because it stored the first name. Checkup. What will each of the following blocks return? What data type is it? What type of block is it? Pause the video so you can answer these questions. When you are done, resume so we can go over them. Assuming you had a go at it, the first one is false, because me is not identical to you, and this block is a hexagon, therefore it is a predicate, and all predicates are either true or false, and me is not identical to you, so therefore it is false. Number 2, this is a reporter. This reports 4, because 4 mod 10 is a remainder when 4 is divided by 10, and therefore the remainder is 4. The return type is also an integer. The third one does not return anything because it is a command block. It is simply running an action. In this case, it is moving 10 steps. Number 4. Number 4 is a reporter because first of all, it is an oval-shaped block. Second of all, it also returns an integer because the year is an integer. Time to practice. Exercises have been designed for this unit so you guys can practice basic data types in Snap. Complete these exercises for homework. When you are done, you will be able to review them in the next class. This is the end of the lesson. For any questions or for more information, email team@codivate.org. Once again, this is 1.2 Snap Basic Data Types and Variables.